Hi there, today I want to spend a little time talking about the final project. So here we are in Module 6, that's how I got here, and this is the first thing that will show up in Module 6. So as you can see, there are basically 4 steps that you should complete in order to do your final project. And the first is very simple, it's just to read the project guidelines, which are listed here, and to look at the sample, which I will show you in just a second. So let's start with the project guidelines. Your assignment is to think about how studying U.S. women's history since 1865 has changed how you, and then historians in general, think about events and themes in U.S. history. And then you're going to create a BuzzFeed type article, or some people call it a listicle, with 7 ways that's called 7 ways that studying U.S. women's history since 1865 shapes the way you think about blank. And in that blank, you're going to pick a theme that we've talked about in the chapters and in the primary documents and the films over and over and over again. It can be any theme that we've talked about in class, as long as it's something that every single chapter hits on. So you'll have to do some brainstorming to come up with those, and your classmates are going to help you with that, which I'll explain in a minute. And once you have hit on a theme that you really like, I'll be keeping a list of approved themes under this link here, which isn't active yet, but it will be soon, to show you like which ones are okay. So let's scroll down. Essentially, there are some pretty simple criteria for your BuzzFeed article or listicle. You're going to choose material from a different chapter, so you have 7 chapters. You're going to choose material from a different chapter for each of the 7 entries. Each of your 7 entries is going to need a numbered title, and I will show you what I mean in the sample here, which I've already opened up. So here's a good example. There's a good example, and then if we scroll down, there's also a bad example. So here's their title. This is from a different class, I just want to warn you. So theirs is actually called 8 Ways That Studying U.S. Women's History Since 1865 Shapes the Way Historians Think About. They had to do 8 instead of 7, but you just remember to do 7. And their theme is freedom. So the very first entry here, yours would probably be from chapter 6 as well, because that's the first chapter that you read for this class. The first entry has essentially a topic sentence here. It's numbered the way a BuzzFeed article is always numbered, and then it makes an argument. So their argument is something about freedom. They argue that the suffrage movement shows that many American women felt that disenfranchisement, which means you can't vote, made them unfree. They felt like they weren't free because they couldn't vote. So you can see how it's relating right back to that topic of freedom, and it's making an argument. So that's what the numbered title is. Think of them like topic sentences in a long research paper. They're all going to make arguments that prove the quote thesis, and we'll think of the title up here as kind of a thesis for your whole paper. All right. Try to keep them chronological if you can, but if there's some reason that another order makes sense, that's fine. Just do what makes the most sense to you. So as you saw on the sample, you're going to have a picture for each of the 7 entries. That picture should make some kind of statement. So for example, if your theme is women's activism and you're going to talk about suffrage, just a picture of a woman voting is not really good enough. Instead, you might want a picture like this one of women picketing the White House to show what kind of activism they were willing to do in order to get the vote. I've given you a list of other possible pictures you could have here if you had different themes. So like if your theme is men's support of gender equality, you might have a picture of men supporting women as they picket for suffrage. If that was your theme, then this picture probably wouldn't be appropriate because there are no men in it. So pick something that really makes a point about your theme. And this one I chose to make a point about freedom. All right, so you can read through the other possible examples there. Just make sure those pictures are all to make a point. I wouldn't use the first thing that pops up in Google because it's probably not going to be very relevant. And here's a list of some ideas for where you can get some pictures that might actually be better than what just show up in Google. You should make the whole thing really pretty. Make sure that your colors and your styles and font sizes, everything is consistent and that the pictures are large and easy to see. Beneath the picture, you're going to give me just a quick citation. Basically, give me all the information that you can find about the picture. So like right here, this has a title, but they didn't know who took the picture. That's fine. Just give me as much information as you have. What you don't want to do is just give me a link. That's not enough, because I guarantee that these are all going to have some more information of some sort. They're either going to have a list of who took the picture or who drew the picture, if it's like a drawing, or if it's a cartoon or something, or they're going to have a title and you're going to tell me when you accessed it. Basically, just give me everything you can, but I don't really care about the way you do that. It can be APA, MLA, whatever. All right, here is the most important part. For every picture, you also need an explanation. The explanation should tell me, first of all, very quickly what's going on in that picture, and then you're going to support your numbered title, which is, remember, kind of like your topic sentence. So this explanation down here should be support for this numbered title right up here. And the way you're going to support that title is by referencing two readings from class that are on the same theme. So probably what you're going to do is pull, if this one's about chapter 6, you're going to pull information from one of three places. Either chapter 6, or the films associated with chapter 6, which was One Woman, One Vote, and from a primary source. So you must cite a primary source for each one, and then you get a choice. Do you want to cite a secondary source, either the textbook or the film? There are some explanations here for how you should cite that. Basically, it's parenthetical, and then I've given you a list of what you need to include in the parentheses. Don't use any outside sources. So essentially, if you have 7 entries, each one is going to have 2 parenthetical citations. One of those 2 will be a primary source, and the second one will either be the textbook chapter that's related or the film. Even if you're not going to pull a direct quote, make sure you give me a citation, just talking about that particular part of a film. If you're just referencing like a little summary of what happened, you're going to still want to give me the title of the film and then an approximate timestamp here, just like you would do in a regular research paper. All right, let's go back up to the top. And so that's what the instructions say, and I hope you'll read those very far in advance, because before you even start working on this project, the second thing that you'll need to do after reading the instructions is contribute to this brainstorming discussion board that I've put up. So here you need to contribute 2 times. Once by Monday, July 18th, and once by the next day, Tuesday, July 19th. A note about this, Canvas is not going to tell you that you need to post for this date. It's only going to tell you that you need to post this second time. There's no setting in Canvas where I can make it say, hey, you got to post to this discussion board twice. So be sure that you hit that first one as well. Your first post should hopefully be based on a theme that you want to write about. So if you want to write about, let's say, women's activism, you're going to want to go through your outlines and make sure that you can find evidence of that in every single chapter. And you'll post under this discussion board here to say, I want to write about women's activism, and here are some places, some different chapters where I see that theme popping up again and again. For your second post, you should look at what everybody else has written for their first post and contribute their ideas. So maybe somebody wants to write about women's work, and she missed a place where there was a good example of women's labor. You might say, hey, Sally, did you notice in chapter 8 there's a really good example of this that you can probably use? So that's just an example. You can do whatever you want really for the second post, as long as you're helping out your neighbors. Doesn't have to just be your group mates, by the way. It should be the whole class. Going back up to the first post, if you can't think of an original theme, like if you're one of the last people to contribute, and all the themes that you thought of are already posted, it's okay if you just chime in the same way that you would do the second post, but you still need to post twice. So if you want to, for your first post, you can just add some information to another person's post, but try hard to not have to do that. Try to post early. All right, for either post, you can also tell me what's bad about the bad example. So back on this sample listicle here, I've given you a bad example. So the good example is up here and the bad one's down here. And you can tell me what's bad about this bad example. What has this person done wrong. All right, so that's another option. I really encourage you to participate on this discussion board as often as possible. Um, I'll give you lots of class citizenship points if you don't just post twice and then move on. Also, before you turn in your final exam or like in the middle of when you're working on it, I would check back to this discussion board. I'm going to chime in probably both on the 18th and the 19th, and then maybe for a couple of days after that. And that's going to be to clarify what people have said and then to correct any mistakes. So you can kind of think of this like a class review where I help you understand the material and make sure you don't have any misconceptions. You can avoid making really silly mistakes on your final exam by paying attention here, and I will use this board a lot to make sure that that's not happening. One quick thing about the sample listicle, you will notice that, as I said, this is from a different class, so their title is a little different from yours. And then the other thing that's different is they've only cited one source, whereas you need to cite two sources. Their requirements were a little different. So don't rely on the way they cited a source here. Make sure you follow what it said to do regarding citing sources here. Remember, you need two, not just one as they have, so just be careful of that. All right, so we've gone through step 1 and step 2. Step 3 is you pick a theme. And it'll probably be a theme that you or one of your friends talked about on the final project brainstorming back here. If you come up with something completely different and you want to email me, that's fine too. But all of the approved topics will be here on this page, which isn't active yet. I'll make it active as soon as people start posting good ideas on the discussion board. So that'll become active pretty soon. So that's step 3. All of those are pretty easy, and step 4 is the big one. That's where you actually do the assignment according to the guidelines below. You're going to submit it as an attachment here. I only want PDFs, please. Make sure that if you're doing it in Google Docs or something, or even Microsoft Word, you should be able to save it as a PDF pretty easily. And finally, I want to point to the rubric down here. Notice that the majority of the points are for the evidence from the 2 different sources that you're going to cite for each of the 7 entries, but then there's also various points up here for sort of basically following the instructions and pulling citations in the correct way and picking good pictures and no typos, that kind of thing. So take a good look at that rubric before you submit your final project, or maybe even before you start it. Please feel free to email me any questions about this. Remember, you can also post on the discussion board. In addition to posting where you are talking about possible topics, if you have any logistical questions about the exam, the Class Cafe is a really good place to post those. So you can do that here, and of course follow through before you shoot me an email asking for clarification about the project.